One of the main topics I cover is monetization in gaming. Typically, it is within the framework of new releases, and alongside that focus, there are also reviews, discussions, and various other topics. But today, I want to focus on what I call going mobile. To set the stage, we must first lay out exactly what the appeal of the mobile market is, specifically from the perspective of developers or publishers. For starters, over recent years, revenue within the mobile market has surpassed the combined revenue of both console and PC gaming. That is already enough to establish motive behind the process of going mobile, but it extends further. Within the mobile market, predatory monetization is very rarely spoken about, acknowledged, or fought against, which is what opened the door in the first place for such a colossal revenue increase, but also keeps the door open for future growth. Unlike the PC and console game markets, mobile releases in a vacuum are not scrutinized. So in an identical situation where a generic PC game has ambiguous pay-to-win loot boxes, and likewise a similar mobile title does as well, the PC game would likely come under intense fire and suffer widespread backlash, while the mobile game could easily skirt below the radar and operate unencumbered. Mobile gaming is also more accessible, not to mention in a lot of circumstances cheaper to develop, so game companies can produce something for a fraction of the cost that does not require hundreds of dollars worth of hardware to play. Well, actually in truth it does, but more people have phones by a monumental margin than game consoles or PCs. Plus, the framework to get a powerful smartphone is much more streamlined since there is a vested interest with telecom companies that have convenient sign-on bonuses and payment plans, etc., which again expands on the available audience. Bottom line, developing a mobile game on average consumes less resources, accesses a much wider audience, and is less prone to backlash using monetization tactics that have helped make the format the most profitable gaming platform on the market. All in all, it's a pretty cut and dry situation. The mobile market is extremely appealing, and because of that, companies that currently specialize in PC or console formats are taking notice. The first sign that the industry is shifting has been apparent for quite a while. It's a pretty common phrase to hear now when new titles release that the game employs a mobile or free-to-play monetization method, quote-unquote. What works for crappy phone games has been co-opted and morphed to try and fit it within AAA titles, but as we discussed, it is usually met with intense backlash. It can be pulled off successfully in some circumstances, but that is usually within actual free-to-play games, and the examples are not plentiful. The second sign that the industry is shifting is much less talked about but far more interesting. There are a few examples, but for today I'll focus on Command & Conquer as well as Diablo Immortal. Command & Conquer is a well-known and prolific RTS, or real-time strategy franchise, that was tabled in 2012 and then in 2018 rebooted. But it was not simply rebooted and remastered for its traditional audience. It was repurposed for the mobile scene. The franchise has a long history within the industry. The first title in the series was one of the earliest ever in the RTS genre, and despite being inactive for a multi-year stretch, it had a large and dedicated audience fully willing to support a new release. Largely fueled by nostalgia, the game had open runway to find widespread embrace and profitability. Nope. EA decided to turn the game into a mobile title. Now, their corporate slick speak would have you believe that this is all for the fans. The mobile platform didn't really have a similar RTS experience, and it was meant to do justice to the once iconic franchise, and blah blah blah, you get the picture. But the real reason is because the company is bound by a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders and an obligation to further improve their bottom line quarter over quarter, year over year. And the mobile market is staring them in the face as the now largest platform in gaming, with the highest rate of per-user monetization when compared to development cost and upkeep. EA is not alone here. Activision Blizzard, another titan within the industry, has tasked Blizzard itself, a once revered studio in the PC gaming space, with churning out a new spin-off within the Diablo series. Fans have long awaited another Diablo game, and when word hit that a new Diablo title would be announced at BlizzCon 2018, it was pretty obvious what the expectation was. Diablo 4 for PC, or perhaps even a spin-off, but again, there was an implicit expectation that this game would be for PC. Nope, what fans got was an unmarked release date preview of Diablo Immortal, a new mobile-only title that, much like Command & Conquer, was met with surprise and aberration. What made matters slightly worse as well was the verbiage used at the conference when developers dropped lines like, "Don't you guys have phones?" when met with a stone-cold audience reaction. A fan even asked if this was somehow an out-of-season April Fool's joke, and the tension was palpable. The long-standing player base, which by extension meant the actual audience in the room itself, was comprised of fans that primarily played on PC and had no interest in mobile gaming. It's a bit confusing to think how this fact escaped Blizzard and what combination of decisions ended with them deciding to reveal a mobile game and only a mobile game at the panel in the face of what could only ever have been negative reception. But regardless, Diablo Immortal was their play at a low-cost, high-yield capitalization on the mobile market that is, to this very day, still picking up steam. Now, switching gears here, mobile adaptations can be done in a mutually beneficial way. If we look at games like PUBG or the Hitman franchise, it becomes obvious that releasing a mobile version alongside a main PC and console version can be very profitable. PUBG specifically is a good example because it has been developing on two fronts, and the mobile title itself has never been perceived as a detriment to the actual legitimate PUBG game. Even a game like Fallout Shelter avoided the controversy that Command & Conquer or Diablo Immortal received because it was released within a larger and more important cycle of titles that the core Bethesda audience was actually interested in. Now, yes, Fallout 76 has its own set of issues, but ignoring that unrelated angle here, Fallout Shelter was a successful play at grabbing a portion of the enormously profitable mobile market. To be clear, the game has its own set of issues from what I can tell, and another mobile title from Bethesda, The Elder Scrolls Blades, has now come under fire for being just too predatory with its pay-to-win structure, but even when they are aggressively moving the goalposts, it is still, relatively speaking, under the radar because it is being released inside a well-publicized, broader roadmap of titles. The case I want to make is that going mobile can be the death of a franchise for its long-standing core audience, but going mobile is an ever-increasing trajectory. All roads lead to Rome, or in this case, smartphones, because companies are faced with the prospect of dumping millions of dollars into a complex PC game or using a fraction of that with 10 times the monetization, a minuscule portion of the risk, and shoving it out the door into a market that is larger than the rest of their target platforms combined. The problem, though, is that the vast majority of the audience in which these large publishers have name recognition are completely uninterested in mobile games, and with very good reason. If the switch could be made flat out, they would have already done it. The modern apex tier of game development is not governed by a legitimate desire to serve the customer, it is governed by the prime directive of maximized profit and monetary returns. EA and Activision have taken a larger step than other publishers so far, but in the same way that monetization has crept over from mobile titles into the industry already, platform focus will as well. Here's another way to lay it out. Candy Crush made $1 billion in a 12-month fiscal year between 2017 and 2018. Anthem, a massive 6-year project from BioWare under EA, made $100 million in its entire launch window, and has now collapsed into veritable ruin. Of that $100 million, only $3 million is perceived to be from microtransactions, which means the rest is comprised of box sales, and thus non-repeatable cash flow. What do you think costed more to develop during that time frame? Candy Crush or Anthem? Candy Crush has seen over 2.7 billion downloads in 5 years, with further billions in profit, and Anthem was a 6-year nightmare, culminating in a meltdown that would be lucky to earn half of what Candy Crush does in a single year over its entire lifespan. You can pick almost any AAA title, and there are mobile games that blow them out of the water. As a console and PC gamer myself, it's not a pleasant thought, but when it comes to fiscal responsibility, large publishers need to focus on the mobile market. Sometimes I feel like a dinosaur. Technology is advancing too quickly for me, especially gaming. I prefer physical discs, but digital downloads have now taken over the market, and with them, games as a service, click-through agreements, and limited access online formats that make me feel like my ability to play the games that I love can be stripped away at any time, by a number of different parties. Game streaming services are looking like another major milestone, because things like Google Stadia or its inevitable competitors are emerging into the scene. And I can't help but think that these changes are all pulling towards a climax that will leave gaming nearly unrecognizable for me. When microtransactions began, players spoke out against them, but behind the scenes they proved profitable. When loot boxes really picked up steam, players fought back, and now the government is even involved, which is not necessarily a good thing, but I'd say it's better than unchecked progression of the mechanic, but even still, loot boxes remain highly profitable. Now publishers have started to test the waters with a pivot to mobile-centered development, and it might be overly pessimistic or gloomy, but I don't see any other scenario than the inevitable focus on the mobile market as it continues to surpass growth projections year over year. The format of releasing all versions simultaneously is, at least in my eyes, pretty ideal. Capitalize on the mobile market, sure, but maintain a focus on mainstream PC and console gaming. But in a rapidly evolving industry where it is more profitable to convert to a widespread and more accessible platform with a less volatile demographic at its core, it's hard to justify Diablo Immortal or Command & Conquer being anything less than a canary in the coal mine. To be honest, there isn't much that can be done about a progression like this. I'm not trying to say that console and PC gaming will evaporate at any point in the near future, if ever, but we should all be prepared for more moments like the Diablo Immortal convention panel, a kind of humorous disbelief and confusion. That's it though. It's not a pleasant topic, but talking about the games industry in a glass half empty kind of way is just kind of what I do right now. When it feels like the glass is half full, I'll scream it to high heaven. But as I learn more and more about current trends and motivations, well, it doesn't feel half full in 2019 so far. There are some bright spots. I can't wait to hear more about Cyberpunk 2077 or continue the Indie Game Spotlight series, but today I wanted to make the case that we should all brace for what could quite possibly be an increasingly mobile-focused development cycle in the near future. That really is it though. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. We have typical YouTube channel stuff like social communities, merchandise, memberships, etc., but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.